Sarah Silverman is known for her very offensive style of comedy. She's just announced she is leaving the Democratic Party. And while it's fair to point out she literally said that she was disavowing both political parties, she's never been a Republican. She's always criticized the Republicans. So it seems like a kind of soft way of saying the Democrats are going insane. Now, for those that aren't familiar, Sarah Silverman lost a job not that long ago because of a comedy sketch she did in 2007. And it seems like a part of her knew that no matter what she did, she could never escape her past. That seems like an unreasonable position for anyone to hold because we're supposed to allow people to evolve. Silverman notes this. She says the parties are rife with elitism and absolutism, and now she doesn't want to be associated with either. It's interesting considering just this past month or two, she was advocating for people to register their friends to vote because she was trying to help Democrats win in Georgia. So what caused the change of heart? Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe it's things like, whatever is happening to Bill Burr, the comedian, being accused of being racist, I guess, because he mispronounced a name and having a non-white wife. I'm not even kidding. There's actually a verified Twitter user saying he may be a racist for being in an interracial marriage. It's things like this that are driving Democrats away from the party. Recently in Nevada, the entire Democratic Party staff for Nevada quit because Democratic socialists won every party leadership position. Personally, I blame the media. And I think the voter bases in this country are built up primarily of two different groups of people. It's not so much left, right, authoritarian, libertarian. A lot of people try to figure out where the culture war is, but I genuinely believe it's those who read the news and those who don't. And what I mean by that is literally those who read the news and those who don't. Within that, you have people who are just bullies and want power. But let me explain the reading the news. There are certain stories that are absolutely fabricated. We have a news story coming out now where 2 months on, the Washington Post has finally admitted to running a fabricated story about Donald Trump. They claimed they had a secret recording that said all these awful things, and people just chose to believe it without being discerning. They just blindly trust the media. So what happens? When news outlets that push rage bait culture war garbage, and I'm talking about powerful venture-backed corporatist ones, they push these narratives that are obviously false because it makes them money. They run a story with an unnamed source, claiming things to be true without any evidence because they know it will make them money. Here's what happens. There are people like you who watch my show or listen to my podcast, and you say, well, I want to dig deeper. Many say I don't agree with Tim or don't necessarily trust him, but I do think he's at least trying to get, an honest take on the media. What I mean by trust is you don't assume everything I'm saying is correct. That's why you're probably watching a show like this. You are discerning and you want proof. But there are many people who turn on CNN and just believe whatever they hear. What happens then when these woke outlets start pushing these narratives, making claims about individuals, calling them far right, fringe or whatever? They just believe it. They then vote for Democrats who are increasingly woke or deranged. Regular people who don't care about any of this are then pushed out, causing major damage for the Democratic Party. I think it's important to point out the Republican Party has their share of crazy conspiracy weirdos, but it seems to be the exception and not the rule. And for the Democrats, it's the rule and not the exception, which is why you see people like Sarah Silverman now quitting even after Joe Biden already won. In a segment this past weekend, Bill Maher said that we are a silly people and China is not. And this is the important takeaway. Let's read this and I'll break down what's going on, what Sarah Silverman is saying, why she's trashing both parties, why she's leaving the Democrats, and where I think this ends up. I do think it's extremely important to point out cancel culture is what is driving people away from the Democrats. And guess what? Republicans are right there with open arms saying, hey, we're the ones saying cancel culture is bad. At a certain point, when regular Americans get canceled, they're going to turn to Republicans, and that's not necessarily a good thing either. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member to help support my work in the event that I get canceled or banned or purged or whatever happens. If you're a member at timcast.com, you are helping to ensure I can keep doing my work. And you also get access to exclusive members-only Timcast IRL segments. So make sure you check that out. And if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, leave us a good review if you really do like the show. But let's get into this and talk about why Sarah Silverman, a famous celebrity who seemed to have loved the Democrats only a couple months ago, is actually quitting the party. Town Hall reports. Comedian Sarah Silverman is a longtime member of the Democratic Party. She's made appearances at the Democratic National Committee. She's been outspoken for her support of twice-failed presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders. But according to Silverman, she no longer wants to be associated with any political party because of the baggage and the elitism that comes with each party. Quote, "It's the absolutistness of the party I am in that is such a turnoff to me. It's so effing elitist, you know. For something called progressive, it allows for zero progress," she explained. "It's all or nothing, no steps towards, all or effing nothing." The comedian described it as righteousness videos, I'll put it that way, something she thought long and hard about. "I don't know that I want to be associated with any party. I really think I don't want to be associated with any party anymore. It's just, it comes with too much baggage." That, my friends, is a particularly important thing to highlight. She's not a Republican. She doesn't like the Republicans. Guess what, my friends? Neither do I. In fact, I don't even think most of the Trump supporters like Republicans. They like the insurgent, libertarian types, America First types who are moving into the Republican Party. I put out on Twitter, impeach Mitch McConnell, and guess what? Trump supporters and progressives were like, okay. I'm like, hey, we can agree on these things, right? I don't like Pelosi. I don't like McConnell. I don't like either party. But the Democrats are losing key support from celebrities who are sick of cancel culture. Obviously, Bill Maher is someone who's roasted cancel culture for some time. But he should have been the canary in the coal mine. This guy who absolutely detests Donald Trump and rags on him at every opportunity had to stop and say, Democrats, you're going crazy. They go on to say, according to Sarah Silverman, every political party comes with baggage she's referring to, so much so that no ideas can be taken at face value. And without ideas, what are we? Without a common truth, how can we talk about it? Silverman used an example of both political parties being suspicious of the other side. There are policies most Americans can agree with and be considered decent ideas, but that depends on who brings them forward and their political affiliation. You know, Republicans might hear an idea that they would totally agree with, but if it comes from AOC, then they hate it. And of course, you know, to be honest, when I hear an idea that comes from a Republican, it's suspect to me. It's that ish that has created divisions in our society, which has prohibited America from being a nation of ideas. Here, Sarah Silverman, you're absolutely correct. But come on, for Republicans, it's the exception, not the rule. Albeit it's a frequently occurring exception, but not the rule. For Democrats, it's the rule. They absolutely took every single opportunity to go after Donald Trump, no matter what, without even evidence. If you are not discerning and you just believed all the lies, it created this cyclone of a predisposition to believe insane trash. Sarah Silverman, welcome to the red pill moment. And let me clarify, red pill doesn't mean you become right wing. It means you awaken to the lies of the corporate media narrative. Republicans may have some bad ideas, but so long as they're pushing back on the lies of the media, so long as they're rejecting cancel culture, who else do you have fighting on your behalf? I can't stand the Republican Party. They do nothing. I'm sorry. Republican leadership is pathetic, a moronic failure. I called them too stupid to deal with social media censorship almost 3 years ago now. So no, you don't have them in your corner. They're basically obstructionists. The Democrats are pushing lies, and many of these Democrats, especially the progressives, believe insane things because the media pushes insane lies in an effort to make money. So no, we can't be a nation of ideas. We can't move forward when one side hates the other no matter what. I refer to the Echelon Insights poll we covered on the IRL podcast, the scary reality of it. Republican voters are like, policy issues matter to me. But when a Republican says they're concerned about illegal immigration because of its impact on the economy, maybe COVID and jobs, things like this, what do we hear? The media machine just says, you're racist. Why? It makes them money. It generates the villain. For Republicans, the villain is not other Americans. The villain is people who hate America and want to destroy it. Sometimes that's other Americans. For Democrats, their villain is quite literally other Americans, Trump and Trump supporters. Don't believe me? I bring receipts. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you this story from the Washington Post. It says, this is from January 9th, quote, find the fraud. Trump pressured a Georgia elections investigator in a separate call, legal experts say, could amount to obstruction. Really? Donald Trump told them to find the fraud. Well, the Washington Post reported it. It must be true. In fact, it wasn't just the Washington Post. How about Vox.com? Trump reportedly told Georgia's lead election investigator they could be a national hero if they found fraud. Trump pressured Georgia elections investigator to find the fraud. ABC, that was CNN, ABC News. On December call, Trump urged Georgia, find the fraud. NBC News. In earlier call, Trump pressured Georgia. You get the point. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the March 11th correction from the Washington Post, where the title now reads, Trump pressured a Georgia elections investigator in a separate call legal experts say could amount to obstruction. But without that quote, what is this story really about? My friends, I give you one of the most profound and devastating corrections we've seen yet in this era. The Washington Post writes, correction, 2 months after publication of the story, the Georgia Secretary of State released an audio recording of President Donald Trump's December phone call with the state's top elections investigator. The recording revealed that the Post misquoted Trump's comments on the call based on information provided by a source. Trump did not tell the investigator to find the fraud or say she would be a national hero if she did so. Instead, Trump urged the investigator to scrutinize ballots in Fulton County, asserting she would find dishonesty there. He also told her that she had the most important job in the country right now. A story about the recording can be found here. The headline and text of this story have been corrected to remove quotes misattributed to Trump. Do you think that correction has reached everyone else? No. Go to Google. Type in Trump pressure, find the fraud, and what will you see? AP News, Trump pressured Georgia. PBS, Trump pressured pressured Georgia. Then you have CNN and Wall Street Journal appearing, showing the real updates. This one, originally from January 9th, seems to have been corrected on CNN. Bloomberg, Trump pressures Georgia. Business Insider, Trump pressures Georgia. CNBC, Trump pressures Georgia. USA Today. Over and over again, Washington Post, U.S. News, they all pushed the lie. Here's the original story. President Trump urged Georgia's leading elections investigator to find the fraud in a lengthy December phone call, saying the official would be a national hero, according to an individual familiar with the call who spoke on the condition of anonymity. In other words, somebody who lied to the Washington Post to smear Donald Trump. Why? Because maybe they were pushing for impeachment? How many stories have come out after the fact that have essentially exonerated conservatives, moderates, the politically homeless, and Donald Trump? The Hunter Biden story. It was blocked by social media, perhaps as part of the effort of that Time magazine, what they refer to as a shadow campaign to fortify the election. And then after the election was over, they said, oh yeah, the Hunter Biden thing, it's all actually true. 2 months after the Washington Post ran this fake story accusing Trump of obstruction, it was the Wall Street Journal that got a hold of the actual phone call, revealing it was not true. The Wall Street Journal says, then President Donald Trump urged the chief investigator of the Georgia Secretary of State's office to look for fraud during an audit of mail-in ballots. During the 6-minute call, which was reviewed by the Wall Street Journal, Mr. Trump repeatedly said that he won Georgia. Something bad happened. He's not correct, by the way. When the right answer comes out, you'll be praised. She responded, I can assure you that our team in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, that we are only interested in the truth and finding the information that is based on the facts. The Washington Post reported on the call in January, but this is the first time the recording has been released. Listen, I do not care to rehash any arguments about the election. This is about the media, their manipulation, and how it's driving people insane and will eventually destroy the Democratic Party. But I believe it will destroy us as a nation before it actually causes enough harm to ruin just one party. Sure, the Democratic Party is being driven insane. Sarah Silverman quitting proves that. The media is pushing lies because they hate Donald Trump. How many of these individuals in the Democratic Party entertain this weapon? This is why I call it the One Ring from Lord of the Rings. I know it may be a silly joke and pop culture reference, but it is a power they can use. It benefits them, but they cannot control it. The media pushing lies ultimately will destroy the Democratic Party. A lot of people talk about how Wokeness is primarily the issue, and it is the focus of what's going on, because I do think that is what's causing a lot of the rift here, cancel culture. But the root cause of even the wokeness is algorithmically manipulated information to be pushed on social media that results in people losing their minds. I love it. There are a lot of people who would accuse me of doing the same thing. By all means, you're allowed to. You can disagree with me. But listen, my friends, if you're someone who just blindly reads these stories and believes them without any scrutiny, without checking any sources, have you ever stopped to question what you hold to be true? I can sit here and say I think the Republicans are really, really bad, and they're the uniparty. We call them that all the time on the RL podcast. It's one political party. The difference, Trump is taking over the Republicans. Bernie failed to take over the Democrats. Trump is far from perfect, and the Republicans probably need a better avatar of their populist anger. But it's very different from the establishment, and the Republicans do have some libertarian individuals. So while I think they're both just really awful political parties, I like Ro Khanna. He's a Democrat because he challenged Pelosi and he's done some good things. Tulsi Gabbard, I was a huge fan of. She was basically my favorite on the Democratic ticket. She's not really there anymore, although I guess technically she's still a Democrat. And I think Rand Paul and Thomas Massie are pretty good too. A small handful of people I can praise from both parties. And I try to give credit where credit is due to stop the hyperpolarization. But there are people who would claim that I'm misrepresenting what's going on or lying. I literally pull up every single NewsGuard certified source to show you what's happening. In the end, the reason why I start with the Sarah Silverman thing is because I think most of us already know this. I don't think I can come to you who watch my content regularly and say, guys, look at this. They caught fake news. You'd be like, and what else is new? And many people have said this to me because I've pointed out, can I really just do another story saying the media is lying? And they say, you have to, Tim. You have to point this out so that people wake up to the lies and they realize what's happening around them. And that's the bigger picture. Sarah Silverman, wow. I mean, she was staunchly defending Democrats for a long time. Now she's talking about absolutism, elitism, and what appears to be cancel culture because she herself was canceled. Look at this one. Sarah Silverman confirmed on the most recent episode of the Bill Simmons podcast she was recently fired from a movie. And I'll just say because of an offensive comedy sketch she did. This is August 12th, 2019. She absolutely understands what's happening. But here's the bigger picture. While I'll point out her quitting the Democratic Party is substantial in my opinion, it's rooted in the lies of the media and how the media is willing to latch onto any garbage, nonsensical rumor that makes no sense in order to run trash news that gets them clicks, makes them money. And in the end, we end up being what Bill Maher referred to as a silly people. Bill Maher says the U.S. lost to China, too focused on woke competition and lizard people. With respect to Bill Maher, I think he's missing the bigger picture. Many would say I'm biased towards the Trump side or the right, and that may be. But when I look at Republicans saying cancel culture is bad, I say they're correct. We need freedom of speech. When they accurately predict some of these things, and even now DeSantis is being praised in Florida for his actions on the lockdown, at what point do you recognize the Democrats are being whipped into a frenzy by an erratic and outraged media apparatus that's pushing insane blue anon type conspiracies? There are certainly a contingent of ridiculous conspiracy theorists on the right with Donald Trump, but that's the exception and not the rule. There's many of them. They're active. They go outside. They do crazy things. Don't get me wrong, but they are not the majority. And what do we say now to people like Sarah Silverman, who's clearly no longer a Democrat? You are now politically homeless, like us. There are many people who voted for Trump. I get these messages all the time. You know, my show, believe it or not, the left might not want to admit it. I hear from a lot of people saying, you know, he's a big Trump supporter. You shouldn't watch his stuff. And not even true. I actually think I criticize Trump more than I actually praise his policies, but I defend him from the lying media more than I criticized him. You see how that works? I refuse to have the media make me say something that isn't true. So when something would come out that was not true, I'd say that's not true. And I would end up defending Trump, and a defense can be easily construed with praise. And it's a fair point. I think so. But it's mostly about the media, the desperation, this kind of, you know, it's a manipulation for clicks. I made that point. Now we are seeing just exactly how bad things are getting. The other day at the Grammys, I mentioned this in my earlier segment. For those on the podcast, you'll hear it in a bit. They reenacted riots as part of a performance. They make it look like all of these things that happen, they propagandize. The media comes out and outright lies about what's going on. I'll give you another example, and this is activists in media. In the reference from the Grammys to the Rayshard Brooks incident, when that story came out about this guy, this is a story about the guy in Atlanta who fell asleep drunk in the drive-thru of a Wendy's. They took a photo of the officer rushing to render aid, and they took a frame of it and tried to make it look like the officer was kicking the man when he was down, and it was fake news. Now, why would they do that? It's not just about making money. It's also about forcing their ideological will on others. And I think many of these people have realized the vulture-like behavior of a desperate media machine is an easy weapon to exploit. And because these outlets have always been biased in favor of liberals, whether the liberals want to acknowledge it or not, they got weaponized for leftist ideas. Well, now you're losing celebrities. Sarah Silverman, Bill Maher, there are many others who are just saying enough. The Hill reports, comedian and late-night host Bill Maher said the United States has lost to China in the battle for the 21st century. During Real Time with Bill Maher on Friday, Maher argued that China was becoming more dominant on the world stage as the U.S. argues over culture wars. He says, you know who doesn't care that there's a stereotype of a Chinese man in a Dr. Seuss book? China. All 1.4 billion of them could give a crouching tiger flying F, Maher said, referencing the Dr. Seuss thing. If anything, they are not a silly people. They are as serious as a prison fight, he said. And you know what? That's some ragging on for the Republicans. I think it was absolutely stupid. Fox News went crazy on Dr. Seuss. Republicans were reading Dr. Seuss. And my only thought was, who cares? Now, of course, I did a segment on Dr. Seuss, but my issue was eBay and other big tech firms banning the private sale of the book. Not so much the book itself, because I actually think if Dr. Seuss Enterprises doesn't want to sell the book anymore, I don't care. You can make your own version of these books if you want to keep them, or buy the limited edition versions. That was the problem. The idea that the books couldn't even be sold or transferred between people is where we start getting authoritarian and freaky. And my bigger issue is with Silicon Valley authoritarianism. Bill Maher is correct, though. Is that what we're really going to be focused on? While the media is lying left and right for a variety of reasons, Fox News and Republicans were talking about Dr. Seuss for like a week, and they were heavily criticized by the left. And I got to say, I actually agree with a lot of left criticism on them. Now is not the time. And that's why I think it is fair for Sarah Silverman to say both parties, you got it. There's something people refer to as conservative ink. There are certain individuals involved with this, like Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens. I think people refer to them as conservative ink. And I tend to support their political battles because they're targeting woke dogma. But I will also criticize them, notably Candace Owens, when she said that, she thinks people should be arrested for burning the American flag. Personally, I disagree with that. I think she's being honest when she talks about what she wants, which is why I will say, while I disagree with Candace Owens, I do think that she's actually speaking to her views and values. But I wonder if conservative ink is more tribalist than anything, in which case they complain about the unpublishing or the halting of publication of certain books. Bill Maher goes on to criticize China's authoritarian government over controversies surrounding Hong Kong's autonomy and the nation's treatment of Uyghur Muslims. However, the host went on to argue that China is able to quickly develop and solve problems as the U.S. debates partisan issues. This is why I focus primarily on, I don't want to get too much into this. I do talk about this a bit in the next segment as well, which came out at 10 a.m. for those that are listening on YouTube. I'm not super concerned about this aspect of it, but I do want to point out we're fighting each other. Why? Sarah Silverman and other celebrities have come out and rejected both parties, I believe is the right approach. Bill Burr is being heavily criticized for mispronouncing a name. And when Gina Carano of The Mandalorian got canceled for saying, stop demonizing your neighbors, I mean, he came out and said she was the nicest person in the world. This is crazy. Now he's got to watch what he says. And I respect his willingness to stand up and say this. But the Gina Carano thing should be a huge warning sign to all of us. As I note fairly often, there are many on the left that will criticize me for mentioning that we're facing some kind of civil war. They think civil war means 1860s, conflict, two factions marching at each other's throats. I don't. I mean, it's that we're so busy fighting each other and viewing each other as villains that we are being overtaken by China. That the media is absolutely pushing these ridiculous stories and these lies. We eat them up because it's the narrative that demonizes the other. And it effectively keeps us trapped. Now, listen, I'll be the first to criticize myself. I make a bunch of videos critical of Democrats, and I'll tell you why. The Republicans seem to do nothing. They don't stop the censorship. They sit on their hands. They complain about the authoritarianism, but then revel in it. They don't actually stop it. A small handful of Republicans actually do the right thing. And it seems like Ron DeSantis in Florida is doing pretty well. But for the most part, they do nothing. They hold policy views I disagree with, and they're mostly establishment members of the single political party in this country that only feigns to be somewhat different. Many on the left will latch onto wedge issues, saying the issue of women or minorities' rights is not something to be taken lightly. And I just look at them and say, your information tends to be based off of propaganda and fake news. The willingness of these big corporations to manipulate whatever they can to make money. Hence the Grammys performance where they depicted a riot in a positive light. Destroying our own country isn't helping anybody. Criticizing the horrible aspects of our country is fine. It's good. It's healthy, actually. Criticizing the Democratic Party and the left is important, and criticizing the Republican Party is important as well. And I think when you have legitimate, honest Republicans criticizing the Republican Party, that's good. And same is true for Democrats. I think we should all be critical of both parties. Hence, I'm much more of a libertarian type person, though I lean slightly left. I'm fairly moderate. What we have today, though, is staunch tribalism, rage from both sides, accusations of who's really being canceled and who's really the bad guy. We have TV driven solely on the manipulation and the lies. Now we can see the cable news ratings are suffering in the Trump slump. This is amazing, and it goes into what I've been talking about, how the media manipulates and lies about everything. Ratings for everybody. Wow, look at this. Who has the biggest ratings drop? It looks like it may be Don Lemon. Don Lemon's ratings have dropped 32.5%. Anderson Cooper, 32.2%. Cuomo, 28.5%. Chris Hayes, 16.7%. Laura Ingraham, 9.2%. Lawrence O'Donnell, MSNBC, 17%. It's really remarkable. Tucker Carlson seems to have the smallest drop with only 4.8%, but everybody is dropping rapidly. Admittedly, even my views are down. Albeit, Timcast IRL views are actually way up. And that's partly on me because I'm putting more focus and energy into Timcast IRL and trying to do something above the trash. But this is the point. The Trump era was tribal warfare in our own country. And now that Trump is out, you can see just how awful it really was for everybody. I think seeing Sarah Silverman and other comedians start talking about this stuff is a good sign. It may show that the media is breaking. They can't hold that narrative anymore. People are starting to wake up to the lies, and they're realizing just how bad things really were. The ratings for these outlets are collapsing, while shows like Timcast IRL on YouTube are actually gaining more and more views. At a time when ratings are in a slump, and people are talking about the Trump slump, I hear from all these different political outlets are saying, yeah, our ratings are down. Timcast IRL is way up. I'm proud of that. I'm proud that we're having real conversations that people respect, that are fairly moderate, and it's doing better. That's what we need to do. And that's what I'm trying to focus on. I've had people say to me that this channel, my other two channels, they don't really get out the view that I'm actually fairly a moderate individual. And the thumbnails and everything tend to make people think I'm just more of a staunch Republican or tribal right-wing individual. And I think that's where the bias comes in. This is why I say the tribes are actually those who are discerning and those who aren't. When the media tells you that Donald Trump claimed find the fraud and you don't hold a critical view of these media outlets. You believe it. And then 2 months later, it turns out you were wrong. And all of these stories are fake and still being shared around. These people end up pushing for laws and policies that make no sense because they just don't get it. And that's the reality of what my channel has always been. Critical of the media and the cathedral narrative. Republicans don't have that. They've rarely had it. Although there are establishment Republican types and people like Mitch McConnell, they do not have a very strong control of public perception and the narrative. That is leftist, that is Democrat. And I have always sought to upend the lies, to challenge the lies and bring evidence of what's really happening. Now, maybe many people have said, Tim, you don't criticize the right-wing lies enough. I criticized Tucker Carlson recently. I criticized him again today. But Tucker Carlson isn't the establishment narrative. He is not the cathedral. The amount of views that Tucker gets compared to all of these other hosts, while it may be high and his ratings may be down less than anyone else's, they're still getting substantially more views. Just because Tucker had the highest rated show in cable history for a short period, it doesn't mean he's actually all that influential. While he was getting around 5 million views per night, you combine the views of all of the leftist anti-Trump stuff, and it is 6 or 7 times as many views as Tucker Carlson. So what am I supposed to say? Yeah, Tucker was wrong about that one. My bigger concern is the giant shark, not the little shark swimming around my feet. While there, or how about there's a gigantic great white, or actually 50 of them swimming in our direction, and that's the mainstream narrative and the lies. And there's one, to my right, who's actually just kind of doing his thing. There are things to be worried about, but I'm more worried about the field of sharks swimming towards us at full speed, causing damage and destroying everything in their path. While there may be narratives and lies that come from the right and conspiracy theorists, and it wraps people up, I think there's a reason why it's the exception and not the rule. For the Democrats, it's the rule and not the exception. They believe lies. I think I made that clear, showing you 2 months on, we're now getting this correction. Please, the only thing I can really say, share this kind of stuff with your friends and family. Let them know you can like the mainstream media, but take it all with a grain of salt. Instead, what happens is you get people like Brian Stelter who claim that Tucker Carlson is the worst of the worst and everything he says is a lie. When in reality, the worst thing about Tucker Carlson is you might dislike his opinions. John Oliver went after him for his opinions and accused him of all sorts of nasty things. Is he wrong on his facts? That's what I'm concerned about. Because I don't agree with Tucker Carlson on a lot of his opinions, but is he wrong on his facts? Sure, he can make bold statements that are opinions. What about his facts? John Oliver's actually fabricated or put out completely bunk information on numerous occasions. Where are the fact checks for him? We don't really see it. We have a handful of outlets that do fact checking on Facebook. One of them happens to be conservative, and the left tries to destroy it. That's the problem. I'm optimistic, a little bit. It goes back and forth. Some things I'm pessimistic about, some things I'm optimistic about. When Sarah Silverman comes out and trashes the Democrats, it makes me optimistic that people are going to break away from both parties, and maybe we'll have a real conversation. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Come hang out for the IRL podcast live. And it's a fun show. We take super chats and comments, which we then will read many of. So if you're interested in having your 2 cents heard, we can't read every comment. It'd be impossible. But come hang out, youtube.com/TimCastIRL at 8 p.m. And we'll see you all then.